The post office is closed in Fleming, Saskatchewan, but no matter, the postmistress, Jean Green, is outside on the gravel road, looking at the open-top Mercedes-Benz with her two granddaughters. "We think your car is just beautiful," she says. "It does look sleek and impressive, if out of place among the dusty pickup trucks parked on Main Street. We don't often see cars like this here. Can we look in it?" Of course they can, and her eldest granddaughter, 14-year-old Carrie's, ends up sitting behind the wheel, getting a back massage from the seat of the 170,000 Singapore dollars 550 cabriolet. Jean takes photos to send their dad while eddies of dust scuffle in the air. "Is it always this windy?" I ask, and she shakes her head. "Oh no, not at all," she says. "Sometimes it's windier." There's not much to shield the wind in Fleming, the first town west of the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border on the Trans-Canada Highway. I've been driving through the wind, off and on, since Halifax, on a frenetic road trip to visit 10 Albanian lakes of Canada's provincial capitals in conjunction with the country's 150th birthday. The first stop was St. John's, Newfoundland, but I only drove around the block before hurrying off to get Screechton. Just as well, there was snow in the air on the Victoria Day weekend and the top was down on the C-Class. All very symbolic, really. There aren't many convertibles in blustery Newfoundland, but if you want the roof off while driving on the rock, a Mercedes is a good choice. Every Canadian Benz cabriolet includes heated seats, and from there, you can add all kinds of extra warmth, a heated steering wheel, and even heated armrests on the most expensive S-Class, air scarves that blow hot air onto your neck from below the headrest and air caps that raise a flap above the windshield and a screen behind the seats to effectively block cold wind from the cabin. So why bother? Because opening the cabin to the sky opens your heart to the country, that's why. There's a lot of heart in Canada, and a road trip in a convertible is still one of the best ways to experience it. I flew west to Halifax and drove up in the sunshine to the Pictou Ferry, crossing to Prince Edward Island and Charlottetown. People didn't look at me so strangely now with the top down, but the $57,000 SLC 300 still attracted come-from-away attention. They looked at me especially strangely when I drove down a boat ramp to dig the tires in the ocean. More symbolism, especially since I was nose first. A similar stunt a few years ago taught me the hard way to not dunk the driving wheels into the slimy, slippery water. All good road trips should include a ferry, and the PEI ship to Wood Islands is officially a part of the Trans-Canada Highway. It drops tourists onto the south shore of the postcard Pretty Island, giving them an hour's drive up to Charlottetown or, turning right, 90 minutes to Anne of Green Gables and the best beaches. The province might be neat as a pin, but its potholes are memorable. I paused only for lunch in the capital, just long enough to see the birthplace of Confederation, 150 years ago. The 12.9-kilometer bridge over to New Brunswick is a stunning piece of engineering that drops westbound drivers in a marshy area scenic only for birdwatchers. The road onto Moncton seems just a passage between endless unremarkable trees, but a detour south to the Bay of Fundy makes up for everything. I swapped over to a more powerful AMG C43 for this drive, and the Benz ate the bends of the secondary highway, skimming past farms and patches of forest on its way to the coast. Farms, forest and the sea, could that be Canada? A flight to Ottawa followed, and then a drive in the larger and more expensive SL 550 east to Quebec. I ignored the navigation system and stayed in Ontario beside the Ottawa River all the way to the bridge at Hawkesbury, which considers itself Canada's most bilingual town. The SL was pleasant enough to drive in the sun but was wasted on the highway, stuck in traffic near Montreal. I switched to a tiny smart four-door cabriolet, just a third of the price of the larger Mercedes, for the rest of the drive to Quebec City. Suddenly, the roads grew bumpier. Was it the Smart's urban suspension, or just Quebec? I found a museum along the way dedicated to Gilles Villeneuve, Canada's Formula One hero, and parked the funky little smart next to a mural of Villeneuve's Ferrari. Hey, they're both open to the wind. Then a pair of flights through Toronto to Winnipeg, to make this drive feasible in 5 days and skip the monotony of northwestern Ontario. It meant I missed the wonderful drive beside Lake Superior from Sault Ste. Marie to Thunder Bay, but time was pressing. If you drive across Canada yourself, do not avoid this section. The road was built to attract tourists, and it's one of the finest drives in the world. And now here I am, in dusty Fleming, Sask, in the most expensive car yet, where the sky dominates everything and the people are as friendly and unassuming as anyone you'll ever meet. I sold some property and I could buy this car, says Jean Green to her granddaughters, teasing. I'd have to live in it, but do you think I should? Their eyes widen and she smiles even more broadly. The nighttime flight from Regina to Calgary drops me just an hour from the Rockies, and I drive west in an AMG SLC 43. The sky is very dark ahead, and I raise the top at last. It's a hard roof with a large piece of laminated glass to let the remaining light in, and the cabin is very quiet when it's in place. The clouds hurl rain to the ground, followed by sheets of hail and ice, and then blow away as if they'd never existed. I drop the top again in Canmore under the tall shadow of the Three Sisters and turn back from the mountains, hurrying past ranch lands and oil pumps to Edmonton. The big sky blackens and clears a few more times before reaching the airport, but the rain never lasts more than a few minutes before it disappears and the road is completely dry. A final flight, sadly taking me right over the glory of the Rocky Mountains and down to the oasis of Vancouver, and then a drive in the most powerful bends of the trip over to Vancouver Island. The AMG C63S makes 505 horsepower, and like with the SL in Quebec, there's far too much traffic at this time of day to properly experience such a car. It's stop and go over the Malahit summit, but the car devours the twisting highway west to Silk. And before I really know it, I've dipped the tires in the Pacific, doubled back and now I'm in Victoria, parking beside mile 0 of the Trans-Canada Highway. Did Canada prove itself to be farms, forest and sea, with some mountains thrown in for good measure? The geography is breathtaking for sure, especially seen without the filter of a roof or even a side window. But no, Canada is not geography. It's an experience and a sense of worth and pride, and a value that's no different in the ports of St. John's and Victoria than in the inland terminals of Winnipeg and Regina. And, dare I say it, after a trip that stayed in the country's southern reaches, in the woods and on the tundra of the north. It's too ambitious to try to see Canada in a week, or even a month, but you've got to start somewhere. And if you do make the attempt by road, it's best to open yourself up to the country in a convertible, and the most comfortable one you can find. You never know what you'll see, and who you'll meet, along the way.
What is it? The fifth model in Mercedes-Benz's ever-growing E-Class family, and the first E-Class convertible in a long while to be an all E-Class offering right to its very core. Why are we testing it? The old E-Class Cabrio was a lukewarm offering that was hobbled by its E-Class underpinnings, leaving it with a cramped interior and cabin design that was at odds with the E-Class sedan of the day. This all-new E-Cabrio rights all of those wrongs. The wheels verdict. The new E-Class Cabriolet is leaps and bounds ahead of its heavily compromised predecessor, and is an exceptional grand tour. After all, it's much easier to see the sights when you don't have a roof in the way. The Wheels Review. The junction of the French, Italian and Swiss borders makes a great place to launch a luxury convertible, what with the abundance of superb roads and jaw-dropping alpine scenery. Natural, then, that Benz would select it as the venue for its 2018 E-Class Cabrio Drive. But less intuitive was Mercedes-Benz's stunt of helicoptering their new drop-top to an observation deck atop Mont Blanc, the tallest peak in Western Europe. A not-so-subtle metaphor about reaching new heights. Marketing speak can be cringeworthy, but this time around such a claim would at least be accurate. The E-Class Cabriolet was a fairly ho-hum thing in its last generation, mainly because it was based on the C-Class and was an E-Class in name only, but its replacement, now built on the E-Class's version of Benz's scalable MR8 platform, lifts itself high onto a fairly lofty pedestal. No helicopter required. As far as four-seat convertibles go, it's one of the best. Big call, but consider how the large Luxo drop-top segment is already fairly sparsely populated. The BMW 6 Series convertible is on its last legs, and while Audi's new A5 convertible has grown, it's still a size category below the E-Class Cabrio. Jaguar has no E-segment convertible equivalent, and neither does Lexus, Infiniti or Volvo. So Mercedes wins by default, but that's not to say it doesn't deserve the crown. After all, the A230h E-Class Cabriolet compromises very little as a result of its roofectomy. Rear seat space is huge thanks to a 113mm wheelbase stretch relative to the outgoing Cabrio. Overall length swells by 123mm, while overall width grows by 74mm. That nets 102mm more rear legroom and 14mm more rear shoulder room, perfect for the wealthy two-kid families that Benz envisions being among the typical E-Class cab buyer. Even adults won't struggle to fit in the back. Convertibles that can comfortably seat four full-growns are thin on the ground, but the E-Class Cabriolet is among of them. Backseat comfort is further enhanced by tri-zone climate control with independent temperature controls and a pair of vents on the rear of the center console, plus the availability of rear seat heaters. The rear backrests are quite upright and adults taller than 5'10" inches may brush against the headlining, but these are the sum total of our complaints about the rear seats. Looking for a convertible that can carry? Here it is. A smaller gripe is Benz's AirCap system, a complex wind blocker arrangement that pairs a power retractable spoiler above the windshield with a more conventional screen behind the rear seats. It's highly effective, enabling easy speech and hairdo-friendly airflow with the roof down, windows up and AirCap deployed, but it looks tremendously dorky with everything extended and spoils the otherwise graceful form of the Cabrio. But really, there's little else to whine about. The interior is a near facsimile of the E-Class Coupes, which in turn is a two-door version of the E-Class sedan, and there's a luxurious aura around everything from the jet turbine-inspired air vents to the twin-screen instrument panel. The leather upholstery is even treated to reflect infrared light, which helps keep the seats cooler when parked in strong sun. No more scorched thighs in summer. And the folding multi-layered fabric roof is fantastic. Powering up or down in just 20 seconds at speeds up to 50 km per hour, it tucks neatly into the boot, cutting 75 liters from the 385-liter overall capacity, and, when raised, insulates the cabin from wind and traffic noise. However, the E-Class Cabrio's most laudable trait is just how solid it feels. Scuttle shake is the enemy of convertibles, but Benz's engineers seem to have vanquished it. Roof down, there's barely any structural shimmy at all. Benz credits this to a reinforcing frame that ties the rear suspension, rollover hoop and soft top into the chassis, and it confers a level of rigidity that's hard to find in the roofless realm. Handling, refinement and comfort all benefit as a result. That rigid chassis is matched by supporting hardware that's just as good, steering with a fluid feel and natural weighting that, in comfort mode, matches the effortless nature of the E400's chassis and powertrain perfectly, coupled with multi-link suspension front and rear which delivers exceptional ride quality of fuel option and air springs. Both the E400 and E300 we drove at launch were apparently equipped with air suspension, but the E300's slightly brittle ride felt like it was on conventional coils. The E400, meanwhile, glided serenely over bumps and definitely sported an air-sprung feel, though we won't discount the possibility that the considerable 155 kilograms weight difference between the two grades may have had something to do with the ride discrepancy. And speaking of the differences between powertrains, it's the E400's 245 kilowatts per 480 Nm twin-turbo 3.0-liter V6 that's better suited to the E-Class Cabrio's nature as a relaxed, comfortable grand tourer. Bursting with low-end torque and a powerful mid-range, it makes light work of motivating the 1935 kilograms E400 and barely sweats up steep alpine roads. Meanwhile, the E300's turbo 2.0-liter 4-pot supplies a decent 180 kilowatts per 370 Nm output, but needs plenty of revs on the dial to get moving smartly. The E400 may be a heavy beast, but that's largely down to it receiving all-wheel drive rather than a rear-drive drivetrain, and a great deal more grip in slippery conditions. Both models come standard with Benz's excellent 9-speed auto. Like the E-Class Coupe, E200, E220D and E350D variants are available overseas but won't be coming to Australia. For us, the E300, E400 and the eventual Mercedes-AMG E53 will be the only powertrain options for the E-Class Cabriolet. The E-Class Cabriolet will begin arriving in Australia in September, with pricing and local specifications to be confirmed soon.